Hello, welcome to Haven. We're on a mission to become whole together, and we're going to talk a bit more about that at the end of this video. But first we have Carl with us. Carl's the senior pastor at Catalyst Church, which meets physically in Brassel. And if you know where that is and you live close by, please drop in and visit. It's a very friendly place. But if not, we've got Carl here, and he's going to be talking to us about some misconceptions about the church. And I think Carl, being a pastor, is probably fairly qualified to do that.
Heard a few of them before. Yeah, it'll be good.
Why do you think there are so many misconceptions about the church, Carl?
Oh, look, I think the church, I'm a fan of the church. I think the church gets a bit of a bad rap sometimes, and I think sometimes the church owns some of the things that it's done. So it's all mixed together, and it is what it is. These are some of the things we've got to face. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things you think people have got a bit wrong is that the church is just an institution.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I hear this from time to time, and I think it's a good one to address. I actually wanted to ask you, Tom, and by the way, great to be here. What do you think it means, Tom, being an average, everyday bloke?
Yes, very average.
Church is an institution. What do you think it means?
Well, I have this idea of a big clunky machine with people, up here, the boss, like to boss people around, and I guess there's also the history of the church. Things that haven't been so good have been attributed to the church. I think of the Crusades and things, but also even in the present day, the institutional church might be seen to be against a lot of things rather than for things. So I think it might be a little bit of mistrust about this institution.
Yeah, look, I think spot on. I think those things, and probably more if we got everybody's opinion. Maybe one I'd add is that church just produces zombie-like people that sort of just get told it's just run by rules. And like I said, some of it the church, or certainly in church history, the church needs to own. There's certainly been mistakes made in the church's history. But one thing I know is, if it worked, that you could just have an institution that sort of did religion really well, faith well, we'd all be doing it. But what we found out is that actually it doesn't work. And I don't know how many times we have to learn that. It was interesting, I was reading about this just this week. King Charlemagne, he was around in 776. He essentially decided what he would do is really for the church, love the church, and he decided what he would do would by threat of death tell people they had to be baptized.
Okay.
Can you imagine being told there's a sword at your neck?
Yeah.
If you don't get baptized, you'll be killed. What would you do?
You would probably say yes.
Probably. Okay, I'll get baptized. Really interesting. And would you believe it? It didn't ultimately work.
Really?
People ultimately didn't go on with their Christian faith.
Yeah.
He took it to all sorts of lengths. He did things like, he came up with some other edicts. If you're a devil worshipper, he'll kill you. Maybe that's fair enough. I think you're probably safe on that front. But what about this one? He also threatened to kill people if you ate meat 40 days before Easter.
Oh,
threat of death. So in this line, the devil worshippers. In this line over here, we've got people that had lamb chops on Thursday night, Didn't work. Again, rebellion started to happen, and he was scratching his head. And an interesting thing happened. A monk by the name of Alcuin, if I can get his name here. Yes, Alcuin. He whispered in Charlemagne's ear, and he says an interesting thing. He says, faith arises from the will, not from compulsion. And I think this is what the church has really had to learn. You cannot, the institution of a church doesn't work if it's trying to make people do something. Romans 2:15 talks about that the laws of God are written on people's heart. So what does that mean? Does that mean the institution of the church is all bad? I don't think so, actually. I think the institution of a church is a wonderful thing if it creates practices and habits that make the ability to worship God and do life making practices a normal thing, a routine thing. I think that's where the church wins. Where the institution of the church gets it wrong is when the church starts to serve its own practices. It forgets almost what its whole point was at the beginning, and then starts to be about this institution and making that survive. And every now and again, and I think Aussies are particularly good at this, Tom, we sniff it out. We look at things and we see it and we think, that's just about being an institution. And that is when the church gets it wrong. But I think churches that are beautiful, and that's our heart for the church, are churches where people are doing practices, but they're doing it so their heart can be touched. And the one thing I'd add to this is, all through church history, you've seen great people, a bit like that priest Alcuin who whispered in Charlemagne's ears, or another big name that people will know of is Martin Luther, a great reformer of the church. I think there's got to be a bit of Martin Luther in all of us every now and again. When we see it and when we spot it, we should speak up about it. We say, and be clear, I don't think the church is meant to be doing it like this, or even personally. If we ourselves are getting a bit lost in the institution, we've got to wake up our own hearts and say, this faith journey of mine has to be about the heart, not about rules and practices. So I could talk all day about it, but it's a valid challenge to the church. But I think there's more to it than just labelling the church an institution.
Yeah, those are some really good thoughts. What stood out to you? Pop that in the comments. But Carl, another myth that you believe exists about the church is that it's irrelevant today and dying out.
Yeah. Well, again, you read the news reports at the moment, you will get this feel. We're so insulated in Australia particularly, this feel that the church is essentially dying. Some interesting maybe stats about this. 30% of the world actually call themselves Christian. That is projected to rise in the coming years. And when you separate sort of east from west, certainly the Western world, the church is not in a great state, but certainly when it's more the Eastern nations, then certainly we're seeing the rise of the church at the moment. So it's not all like it might seem. The other thing is the church has always had these waves of sort of strengthening and growing, and then these waves where things contract and come back a little bit. And I'd hazard to say that certainly in the West at the moment, and this is where I would agree, we're on a bit of a downward trend. I think back in the 50s in Australia, nearly 50% of people said, I'm a part of a church. I think in the 70s, it was something like 35% of people came to church at least once a month. In more recent times, that has dropped back to about 15%. And on any given Sunday, only about 8% of people are in church. So where are we at in Australia at the moment? Yes, we seem to be on sort of one of the downward curves at the moment. I will make this point though, even 8% of Aussies in church is more than double the amount of people that are at sporting matches on a weekend.
Oh, really?
So it gives you some perception there that, well, sport's pretty popular and church is pretty popular as well, still to many degrees in Australia. The other thing I'd say is, yes, it might be a little bit like this, but McCrindle, a social researcher in Australia, did some study post-COVID into people's views, average Aussies' views on spirituality in Australia. And he found something interesting. He found that at the moment, it's actually on an up curve.
Okay.
People are actually hungry. 1 in 4 people have said, since COVID, I'm more interested in spiritual things. So I think what this means is, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. I don't think it means that people are just going to be running back to church. But it also means I'm in the business of church. I'm optimistic that we have an opportunity to talk about what the church is, what faith is, and do that in a really natural way. And look, things like Haven are part of that. It's quite an innovative way of talking about faith-based topics to people that are out there, particularly in the internet world. So that's one way that we're taking a hold of that. And maybe the last thing I'd say is, I think the church, and this sounds a bit maybe crass, but I think the church is a great product, in marketing terms. But where else will you get incredibly good insight and wisdom into topics like financial management, work-life balance? Everybody's interested in that at the moment. How to bust through addictions, the issues of identity. These are the sorts of things that are talked about at churches nearly every single week. So I think it's a great thing, and I think my view, we're on the bottom of the curve at the moment, and I think we're going to find things start to turn even here in Australia. So watch this space. It's worth being connected to a church.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like it's all bad.
It's not all bad. There's some good news out there. Yep,
But
absolutely.
still, there might be some people that see, well, it's still a fairly small number of people going to church. It seems to be on a downward slope.
Sure.
And I've got a busy life. The church is going to take away half my weekend. Why would I be giving my time and energy to church at this stage of my life?
Yeah, well, again, massive topic, great question. And that is the fear that certainly people have is, I'm already time poor. I don't want to be sucked into some vortex of giving all my time to this thing called the church. What I would say is that the church, if your perception is how much will the church try and take from me, I'd actually say you've probably got the wrong perception of even what the church is all about. What am I getting at there? I'd say it may be like this. The church isn't about trying to take your time. This will sound a bit odd, but the church is your time, or the church is how you use your time. What am I talking about? I'm really saying if you are somebody of faith, somebody that says, I believe in the claims of Christ, then you can't help it. You are actually automatically a part of the church. The reason for that is church is not a building, it's not a place, it's ultimately not an institution. The biblical word is the ecclesia. It's people. It's people that are called out to follow God. So what that means is, if you are somebody of faith, then you are automatically a part of the church. So a better question or way to look at it would be, how am I using my time? Because whatever way I'm using my time will ultimately affect the strength of the church, or where or how well the church is doing. Because if I'm sitting on a beach 50 weeks out of 52 weeks of a year, the church is going to be a little bit weaker. But if I'm loving and engaged and part of that community called the church will be stronger. So what I'm trying to say in all of this is, it's the best way to look at it isn't about how much time is being asked of me, but when we understand the calling to be a part of a church, we understand we are part of it no matter what. The Bible has so many analogies for what the church should look like, and they're all around relationship. Things like the body. Well, you think about how the body all relates to each other. The hand relates to the feet, to the eyes. It talks about a temple, but then it talks about a temple is made up of all the living stones. So the church itself is always referred to as this relational force. And what the Bible does and what people of faith do is call you into that relationship. And I believe if you're a part of that relationship, you do other people good, but I'd say this, it does you good to be a part of it. So it's not viewed then as, should I give my time to it? It's viewed more as, I want to be a part of it and engage in it because it ultimately does me good at the same time that I can bless other people. So a bit of a long-winded way of saying, I think absolutely it's something that's worth investing our time and our energy into.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Really good information. But I guess, why church? Why not some other community group doing something great? Why church?
Yeah, well, I love that question, and I often say around here, church is, it's not the Rotary Club, and as good as they are, or the Lions Club, or the PCYC, or the school committee, or whatever. All these other things, these are all good organisations, but church is God's idea It's a beautiful thing. It's made up of people. I believe it's a living organism, really, in its own right. But the thing that I always come back to is that Jesus himself gave his life for the church. In Matthew 27:46, Jesus, and I think it's one of the most telling statements in all of the Bible, Jesus is hanging on the cross and he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And it's really interesting. I love how Tim Keller puts it. You know, Keller says he didn't call out, you know, my hands, or my feet, or, you know, my head. These things you would expect, the pain that he'd be in, he called out, my God. So what was happening there for Jesus? We know that Jesus had been in perfect, eternal relationship with God, the Father, his whole existence. But in that moment, he gave that up for us. He suffered a solitude, a rejection, if you want, a silence from God the Father that I don't think we will ever fully understand personally. But he did that for a reason. He did that so you and I could have relationship with the Father. So you and I actually can have relationship with each other. So this beautiful thing called the church could come together and be everything that it was meant to be. That's why he went through that pain. And it's what reminds me that, you know, when I engage with the church, I'm not doing it just because it's another good organization. But I'm doing it because somebody loved me that much to give me access to this beautiful thing called the church. And that is ultimately my inspiration for engaging with church. It's the witness, and it's what Christ did for me.
Sounds like something the church has to keep coming back to.
That's right.
We've got to. It was born.
And that's what makes it not an institution. Yeah. That's what makes it something far beyond, and I think something that's beautiful.
Lots to explore there, Carl.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us.
No problem.
And maybe there's something that Carl didn't address today. Please ask that question in the comments, and Carl, will you come back and answer any other questions people have?
Anytime, or straight away, whenever is required, I'll do it.
Excellent. There you go. Good to hear. Now, one question I would probably ask is, what about the church? Why is the church always asking for money? But maybe that's not such a big problem. I see people very generous.
Yeah.
And, you know, if people believe in a cause, I think I've seen people, they're generous towards it. So we've got some causes here at Haven that we believe in and needs in the community where we're trying to make some difference. Some of these problems are big, but we see just doing something can lead to really good things. So we have poverty is one thing that we see we want to do something about. The environment and also loneliness. So those are three things that we care deeply about. And if you would like to help us work towards creating solutions, just making a start towards seeing these things better, because that's our heart in the community. We'd love to hear from you. You can find out more information about that on our website, but we really want to do this together. Speaking of big problems, things that seem overwhelming, my YouTube channel. Carl, did you know I have a YouTube channel?
I click on it every now and again. I'm a subscriber. Did you know that?
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
One of few, perhaps. But you know, when I look at my YouTube channel and I compare it to this other YouTube channel that I am subscribed to, Mr. Beast. You've heard of Mr. Beast?
Oh, my daughters talk about him. Yes.
55 million subscribers.
Wow.
So, in comparison, my YouTube channel is quite insignificant.
Half that, or
let's think a little bit long. Let's just say I'm never going to reach that level. Did you know he started 300 burger restaurants in one day recently?
No.
No, he did.
Really?
And that he gives 10 cents to charity for every new subscriber he has. So
really?
These are the sorts of things that I see as the ultimate YouTube channel.
Okay.
But, you know, you might have things like that in your life where you see you're not measuring up to your hopes and expectations. And I said at the start, here at Haven, we're looking to become whole together. And life is a bit of that, a process of becoming whole. And, when I look at the example of human wholeness, I look at Jesus. That's human wholeness. I don't know if he's been described like this before, Carl, but in this context, the Mr. Beast of humanity. Just like I'm not going to get 55 million subscribers, I'm not going to become as whole as Jesus was. So that's the bad news. The good news is Jesus invites us into his wholeness. That'd be like Mr. Beast saying, "Hey Tom, I noticed you're struggling with your YouTube channel there. Would you like to come and join mine? Help me film it. Share in my earnings. Let's do this together." That's sort of the invitation Jesus gives us.
Yeah, it's good.
Share in this.
Yeah.
But there's more. Not only that, it's Jesus looks at our daily existence and he says, "Let me help you become whole in your life." It's like Mr. Beast saying, "Well, yeah, come part of what I'm doing here, but then, well, your channel there, I can help you with that. Let me help you, give you some tips. Let me help you get your channel up and going." So that's what Jesus is offering us as well. When we say, "Yep, Jesus, I want to come and I want to have you make me whole. I want to be on your team," he also starts to work in our lives and bring wholeness into our lives. So that's a pretty amazing invitation. And it's just sitting there, like on our Messenger account. It's like sitting there maybe with a little grey arrow next to it, or maybe we've read it, a little profile pic there. But are we going to respond? That's the invitation's there.
Yeah.
And we just need to respond. So it's easy as saying, "Jesus, I respond. Yes, I accept that invitation." And if that's you today, well, how about we give people an opportunity just to pray that with us right here. Say after me if you like. Dear Jesus, thank you for this offer of wholeness that you extend to us. Lord, my life is not what I want it to be, and it's definitely not living up to what I know it should be. But I accept your invitation to make me whole. And thank you for that. Thank you for what you did, the price you paid to make that possible. Thank you that you noticed me. And I want to commit my life to learning from you, to listening to you, to working with you to become whole. Amen. That's a pretty amazing thing that you've just prayed, and becoming whole together. That's our mission. So if you prayed that, fantastic. We'd like to support you on the journey you've just started. So please let us know. You can send us a private message from our website, or pop it in the comments even if you feel brave. We'd like to celebrate that with you. But we'd love to help do life together. This Christian life, whether you've started it or not, whether you're still exploring, we'd love to connect. We'd love to explore this together. And some of you have done that this past week. I've had a few conversations on Messenger and a Zoom call. Hello if you're watching again with us. But we'd love to connect with more of you. Any time of the day, maybe not while I'm sleeping, but any other time, Carl, we'll be there, ready to respond. So thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.